Viking raids beginning in 793 transformed divided Anglo-Saxon kingdoms into a shared Anglo-Danish realm. The great heathen army seized York and Mercia, establishing the Danelaw, land ruled by Scandinavian law east of Watling Street. 5 towns, Derby, Leicester, Lincoln, Nottingham, and Stamford, became its fortified centres of trade and justice. Norse settlers introduced assemblies, coinage, and words that reshaped English life. Over generations, conquest evolved into coexistence through commerce, law, and intermarriage. Alfred's heirs later reclaimed these boroughs, forging a unified England rooted in both Saxon and Norse traditions, where peace emerged from adaptation rather than conquest. Wind carries more than salt across the northern sea. It carries memory, the voices of sailors who once steered their wooden dragons toward a distant coast, where smoke and green valleys promised reward. Each dawn along that grey horizon announced movement. Oars struck water in a steady rhythm, shields flashed like coins under the sun, and the sound of iron spread faster than rumour. From the fjords and islands of the north came men seeking land, honour, and permanence. To them, the sea was a living highway, a path linking kindred shores, and England lay at its end. In the summer of 793, a storm touched the holy island of Lindisfarne. Monks heard the surf change pitch before they saw the ships. Within hours, the sanctuary of saints turned into a furnace of smoke. Bells rang over the cries of men. Relics disappeared into plunder sacks. The tide ran red. The chronicles called the assault a divine warning, yet the event revealed something deeper, the dawn of a new power rising from the north. What began as a single raid awakened a century of transformation. Through the following decades, sails returned each spring. Longships reached the Humber, the Thames, the Severn. Gold, grain, and slaves flowed backward across the water, while stories of terror spread inland. Yet among the warriors were farmers and craftsmen, families who carried seeds and tools as well as swords. Their ambition extended beyond plunder. They sought to plant themselves in the soil of this wealthy island. England at that time stood divided. 4 kingdoms, Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, and Wessex, shared uneasy borders. Rival kings traded oaths and betrayals, their strength measured in fortresses and kin. None possessed the unity to resist a coordinated invasion. In 865, unity arrived from the opposite direction. Fleets from Denmark, Norway, and the Isles of the Baltic converged under a single banner. The chronicles called it the Great Heathen Army. Among its leaders marched names that would echo across a millennium. Ivar the Boneless, strategist and mystic. Halfdan Ragnarsson, disciplined commander. And Ubba, whose ferocity gave courage to every shield wall. They landed first in East Anglia, secured horses from local nobles, and advanced north. Civil war had already weakened Northumbria, and the invaders struck while its kings quarrelled. York fell after a brief siege. The victors raised their standards over its Roman walls, transforming the old city into a Scandinavian capital. By 869, the army returned south, moving through East Anglia once more. King Edmund rallied his people, but his small host broke beneath the weight of the enemy. Captured, crowned with arrows, he entered legend as a saint. His martyrdom sanctified resistance, even as it confirmed defeat. From York, the army turned toward the heartland, Mercia. Rivers became their supply roads. The Trent carried them deep into the Midlands, through meadows and wetlands that reflected the glow of their campfires. In 867, they reached Nottingham, a modest settlement built around the ridge above the river. Its limestone caves and hilltop fort offered ideal shelter. The Danes fortified it and claimed it as a base. King Burgred of Mercia called his allies in Wessex and marched north. His soldiers surrounded the city but lacked the endurance of their foes. The Danes held firm behind new earthworks, raiding the countryside for supplies. As winter arrived, Burgred's army dissolved. The harvest demanded his men's return to their fields. The besiegers withdrew, and the banner of the Raven remained above Nottingham's gate. In the years that followed, Mercia faltered. Offa's old kingdom fractured into minor lordships, each paying tribute to survive another season. By 874, Burgred abandoned his throne and fled to Rome. The Danes installed Ceolwulf as their client ruler and divided Mercia in two. Power now radiated from the north, York under Halfdan, and from the east, where Guthrum, another Danish commander, prepared for new campaigns. The next struggle came in the south. Guthrum's army entered Wessex, forcing its young king, Alfred, into retreat. For months, he hid among the marshes of Somerset, rebuilding his strength while his enemies believed him dead. When spring returned, he struck. At Edington in 878, Alfred's army broke the Danish line in a decisive victory. Yet the aftermath revealed a shift in both rulers. Guthrum accepted baptism. Alfred offered peace. Their negotiation produced the Treaty of Wedmore, a document that divided the island but preserved the dignity of both sides. The treaty drew an invisible road from London north to Chester, along the ancient line of Watling Street. West of it lay the realm of the English kings. East of it spread a new dominion ruled by Scandinavian law. That frontier defined an era and gave a name to it, the Danelaw, the land governed by Danish custom. Within its bounds, authority rested on a different foundation. Towns became military and administrative centres rather than royal estates. 5 stood above all others: Derby, Leicester, Lincoln, Nottingham, and Stamford. Each served as a stronghold, a market, and a court. The jarls who ruled them enforced local order, minted coinage, and collected tribute. Together, they formed a northern constellation of power, known later as the 5 boroughs. Life inside these boroughs moved to a new rhythm. Streets once patrolled by Saxon reeves filled with Norse traders. Marketplaces echoed with mixed tongues. A farmer might sell grain priced in English silver to a merchant weighing it in Danish marks. Craftsmen forged blades marked with runes beside monasteries, ringing Christian bells. The coexistence of 2 civilizations created a fusion more potent than conquest. Language carried the proof. Across Lincolnshire and the Midlands, villages ended in by and thorpe, meaning farm and hamlet. Words such as husband, fellow, window, and knife entered English speech, silent witnesses to cultural merger. In law, too, the northern influence endured. Disputes were settled in open assemblies called things, where local freemen spoke judgment rather than kings. Fines followed scales known as vergilds, valuing life through compensation instead of vengeance. Trade flourished. Ships from York sailed to Dublin and the Baltic, linking inland markets to the wider northern world. Lincoln became a hub of textiles and metalwork. Leicester traded salt and pottery. Derby and Nottingham turned their rivers into arteries of exchange. Wealth travelled with astonishing speed, and prosperity bound conqueror and conquered alike. Religion followed commerce. Pagan shrines gave way to wooden churches. Priests preached beside storytellers who still recited sagas of Odin and Thor. Conversion moved quietly, through marriages and baptisms rather than edicts. Within a generation, the children of settlers spoke English prayers, yet kept Scandinavian names. The Danelaw matured not as a colony, but as a shared civilization shaped by necessity. Every piece contains its shadow. Beyond the western frontier, Alfred and his heirs built fortresses, burhs, to guard against renewed invasion. Along the borders of the Danelaw, those forts faced the Danish strongholds across the rivers. Between them stretched a corridor of tension, where patrols, traders, and messengers crossed daily. Yet even under watchful eyes, the border breathed. Merchants ignored lines drawn on parchment. Lovers and mercenaries crossed them without hesitation. Out of that motion grew the seed of a unified realm that neither side yet recognized. By the end of the 9th century, England had changed beyond measure. The old kingdoms that once defined its map had merged into two spheres of power, the English crown in the south and the Danish law in the north. Their rivalry shaped every field, every church, every tongue that followed. In that frontier between Trent and Tees, a new England was forming, an England of blended voices, where strength came not from walls, but from adaptation. The era that began with fire on Lindisfarne now reached a fragile equilibrium. Ships still crossed the sea, but many carried families instead of warbands. Farmers sowed in soil enriched by trade rather than fear. The Danelaw stood as proof that conquest could evolve into community. Yet under its calm surface, ambition waited. Every border in history is temporary, and every treaty carries the memory of unfinished war. The balance achieved at Wedmore would hold only until the next generation decided who truly ruled the heart of England. Morning mist rises from the River Trent like breath from the earth. Along its banks, smoke drifts from cooking fires, and the sound of hammers carries through the damp air. Nottingham stands at the river's curve, a cluster of timber halls and narrow streets wrapped around the stone ridge that once held the Danish encampment. The scars of battle have faded, but memory lingers in the rhythm of daily life. Every cart that rolls through the gate and every bell that marks the hour tells the same story. The land of the English now speaks with more than one voice. To travellers entering from the south, the town feels both foreign and familiar. English merchants display wool and grain beside Norse craftsmen selling iron tools and amber jewelry. Children play among carved posts that once held shields, their laughter echoing between words of two languages that merge into one cadence. Even in prayer, the sounds mingle. Inside St. Mary's, an English priest recites verses translated for those who still think in the speech of Denmark. In the market outside, a storyteller recounts the voyage of Sigurd the Volsung, his audience nodding while counting silver stamped with Alfred's face. This is what peace has made possible, a frontier culture where trade and memory weave together. The Danes who arrived as conquerors have begun to settle into farmers and traders, their ambitions anchored to land rather than raiding. They repair roads, raise timber halls, and dig new wells. Many take local wives, blending families as they once blended tongues. Over time, even the stories of origin shift. A child born in Lincoln or Leicester no longer imagines the North Sea as home, but as a horizon that carries news, goods, and the whisper of kin. The 5 boroughs embody this transition. Derby guards the valleys of the Peak and the western approach to the Danelaw. Leicester sits at the meeting of roads, its old Roman walls now crowned with wooden towers. Lincoln commands the Witham, gateway to the Humber and the distant sea. Nottingham holds the central river route, its caves used for storage and refuge. Stamford anchors the southern edge, trading cloth and horses with Mercian markets beyond the border. Together they form a chain of power and commerce, binding the Danelaw's interior to the coast. Each borough functions as fortress, court, and marketplace. The Jarl who rules it oversees justice through assemblies of freemen, the thing where disputes are resolved by oath and compensation rather than by vengeance. Witnesses speak, elders deliberate, and judgment falls through consensus. Law becomes performance, a civic ritual affirming belonging. The system differs from Alfred's written codes, yet both aim for order. The meeting fields around Derby and Lincoln often gather hundreds of men. Behind every verdict stands a belief that stability is stronger than punishment. Coinage reinforces that order. In York and Lincoln, mints strike silver marked with runes or the names of kings far away. Some carry the cross of Christ beside the hammer of Thor, as if both heavens claim dominion over the same people. Merchants weigh them on bronze scales, testing their worth with practiced fingers. The clink of silver replaces the sound of war. In its rhythm, a new unity grows. Across the countryside, farms expand. Timber halls rise where monasteries once stood. Ploughs cut deeper furrows through soil enriched by centuries of settlement. The Danes bring a pragmatic approach to land division. Fields are measured in strips and assessed by productivity. Shared grazing lands reduce rivalry among neighbors, while boundary stones mark property with carved symbols rather than words. These customs spread quickly, carried by marriage and trade into the territories that remain under English kings. Beyond the fields, the rivers tie the region together. Barges laden with wool, salt, and iron drift toward the Humber, where larger ships await passage to the Baltic. The sea connects rather than divides. It turns York, Lincoln, and the smaller port of Grimsby into stations of a single northern world. Fishermen speak of voyages to Dublin and Ribe, and sometimes to lands even farther east. Each return voyage brings stories, goods, and strangers who find in the Danelaw a place that feels both new and known. Culture flourishes in this mingling. Artists carve beasts from myth on doorposts. Metalworkers in Leicester fashion brooches shaped like serpents and birds. The Christian cross appears on their surfaces beside runic inscriptions of protection. Scribes copy gospels with ornament inspired by Norse pattern and Saxon symmetry. The result is neither imitation nor compromise. It is creation. Out of two traditions emerges a style that belongs to both and to neither entirely. Yet behind every shared endeavor lies the memory of conquest. Old nobles remember when their halls stood alone, before Danish banners flew from their gates. The younger generation grows in another rhythm, raised among mixed tongues and hybrid loyalties. In some halls, English fathers teach their sons Danish words for tools and seasons. In others, Danish wives light candles for English saints. The line between foreigner and native thins with each passing season, though it never fully vanishes. In Lincoln, the heart of this new society beats strongest. The city, once a Roman outpost and later a Saxon town, now hums with northern enterprise. Workshops along the Witham forge, weapons, hinges, and jewelry. Traders gather at dawn near the bridge, shouting prices across languages. From the cathedral hill, smoke curls from hundreds of hearths. A visitor might hear the chants of monks mixing with the calls of merchants and the distant ring of a blacksmith's hammer, sounds of a civilization forging itself anew. Stability, however, remains fragile. Each year brings whispers of unrest along the border. Alfred's successors in Wessex and Mercia build new burhs facing the Danelaw, fortresses of stone and timber that mirror the boroughs across the frontier. Markets flourish between them, but so do rivalries. Raiding parties still cross the rivers when harvests fail or ambition rises. The memory of war never fully leaves the soil. it sleeps beneath the plough. In the midst of this uneasy calm, diplomacy shapes the future. Messengers ride between Lincoln and Winchester carrying proposals for tribute, trade, and the exchange of hostages. Each agreement blurs the boundary further. Some Danish leaders convert to Christianity, seeing alliance as more profitable than isolation. Baptisms take place in rivers once crossed by invading ships. The gesture carries politics as much as faith, a promise of coexistence spoken in water and witnessed by both sides. As generations pass, law evolves into habit. The descendants of Guthrum's soldiers grow accustomed to Alfred's coinage. English courts adopt aspects of Scandinavian practice. The word lagu, law, enters English speech, blending with older terms like doom and right. From such mingling emerges the foundation of later common law, a quiet legacy of the Danelaw's experiment in shared order. Language itself becomes a record of this fusion. A man from Lincoln can speak with one from Winchester and still be understood, though his words carry northern edges. He says egg where others say eye, window where others speak of eye-hole. The new tongue that rises from the Midlands holds the future of English, simpler in grammar, broader in sound, ready to absorb influence without losing strength. In towns and villages, community deepens. Winter gatherings replace war councils. Families share ale brewed from barley, grown on once contested land. Skalds sing of ancient voyages beside Christian psalmists, and their audiences applaud both. The longhouses echo with laughter instead of alarms. Peace gives people the chance to remember, to build, and to imagine continuity. Through these decades, the Danelaw ceases to feel like occupation and begins to appear as inheritance. Children born under its customs see themselves as English, yet distinct, heirs to a region defined by resilience. When they travel south into Wessex, they find familiarity in the markets and churches, but also pride in their difference. They carry the northern cadence in their voices, a reminder that England has more than one heart. Still, ambition stirs among rulers on both sides. In the west, Alfred's descendants dream of reclaiming all the island. In the east, the Jarls of the Five Boroughs see themselves as lords of a rightful realm. Beneath their treaties runs an undercurrent of rivalry. Armies rest but never disband. Coins bear dual symbols. Chronicles written in monasteries tell the story of peace while preparing for the next campaign. Every stable order invites the question of how long stability can last. By the year 890, rumours of new fleets reach the coast. Fresh war bands sailing from Denmark, eager for the wealth their forebears once claimed. Veterans of the old invasions now watch their sons sharpen blades, uncertain whether to resist or join them. The frontier that had become a bridge threatens to turn into a wall again. Across the Danelaw, people prepare as they always have, by planting, trading, and waiting for the wind to change. As dusk falls over Lincoln's walls, torches flicker along the riverbank, merchants pack their stalls, guards close the gates. Somewhere beyond the marshes, the sea reflects a line of red light fading into grey. That horizon has always defined this land, source of danger, source of renewal. The Danelaw endures between both forces, holding the memory of invasion within the routines of peace. Its people have learned that history seldom ends with victory or defeat. It continues through adaptation. What began with longships on the northern sea now lives in the quiet rhythm of a marketplace, in the sound of a hammer striking iron, in the blending of two languages beneath a single sky. The heart of England beats there, steady and complex. waiting for the next age to test its strength. The year 910 opens with a sound England has not heard for a generation. Armies moving. Hooves grind frostbitten earth. Banners flap in the west wind, and the songs of men on the march roll across the valleys of Mercia. On the frontier of the Danelaw, fortresses wake from quiet prosperity to the echo of war. The balance born at Wedmore begins to tilt. From his hall at Winchester, King Edward the Elder surveys a realm stretching farther than any of his fathers. Alfred's fortresses line the south like a chain of iron, each connected by road and beacon. Edward understands that walls alone cannot hold peace. The Danelaw's wealth grows faster than his own, and its merchants pay tribute only to profit. To secure the future, he must reclaim what was once Mercia, its markets, its rivers, its 5 shining boroughs. In that cause, he finds a partner equal in resolve. Ethelflaed, Lady of the Mercians, his sister and commander of the West. Her husband, Ethelred, had governed Mercia during Alfred's wars, and upon his death she inherits both his title and his army. Chroniclers later call her gentle, but the men who follow her know her as precise, tireless, and bold. She speaks little. Her actions carry the authority of command. Under her rule, Mercia rises again, not as a rival to Wessex, but as its sword arm. The first campaign strikes north along the Severn. Edward's engineers raise new burhs at Bridgenorth and Tamworth, twin fortresses controlling the river roads. From these outposts, Mercian troops push toward Derby and Leicester, the 2 western gates of the Danelaw. Raiders meet them in skirmishes among the woods, quick and brutal, testing resolve. Each encounter hardens the army that will soon face the 5 boroughs in earnest. Inside the Danelaw, word spreads faster than any herald. Riders gallop from Leicester to Lincoln, warning jarls that the Saxons march under banners blessed by bishops and led by a woman whose courage equals that of kings. Markets empty as smiths melt silver into coin for soldiers' pay. Councils of elders gather in the open fields, debating whether to resist or negotiate. Some recall the treaties that built their peace. Others insist that honor demands defense. Through these arguments flows a single fear, that the age of quiet prosperity is ending. By midsummer, the first great collision arrives. The armies meet near Tettenhall, where the valleys of the Trent open toward the hills of Staffordshire. The Danelaw's lords, Eiric of Derby, Ingemar of Leicester, and others whose names survive only in fragments, assemble a coalition from across the north. Their banners show dragons, crosses, and ravens, a mosaic of loyalties more complex than any single command. They expect to raid, to seize plunder, to retreat as they always have. Instead, they find an enemy who has learned from them. Edward's forces fight with the discipline of a machine. Shield walls lock into position, cavalry maneuvers with precision unheard of in earlier wars. For 2 days, the battle rages through rain and smoke. When silence finally returns, the field is littered with the fallen. Among them, 3 Danish kings from Northumbria and countless jarls from the Midlands. The victory is complete. The chroniclers of Wessex call it divine favour. The men who fought know it as preparation rewarded. The defeat shatters northern confidence. In the aftermath, Mercian and West Saxon engineers march behind the armies, raising fortresses on every captured road. Each structure marks a step forward, a physical claim on the soil. New walls rise at Runcorn, Stafford, and Warwick, built with labour drawn from conquered villages. Ethelflaed oversees construction herself, travelling with a small escort and a chest of holy relics to bless each site. Her presence gives courage where fear lingers. The people call her Lady of the Burrs, protector of the frontier. While Edward consolidates in the south, Ethelfled drives deeper into the Danelaw. Her scouts map river crossings. Her emissaries offer peace to towns willing to submit. The campaign is as much diplomacy as war. Some boroughs choose alliance, valuing trade over resistance. Others hold firm behind their palisades, trusting that reinforcements from York will arrive. None yet realize that Northumbria is too divided to intervene. By 9113, the line of advance has reached the gates of Derby. The town, once the strongest of the 5 boroughs, guards the routes from the west to the heart of the Danelaw. Its Jarl commands warriors seasoned in border raids and emboldened by pride. When Ethelfled's forces approach, he sends envoys demanding tribute. Her answer is the thunder of siege engines. The assault lasts weeks. Wooden towers roll toward the walls, while archers trade volleys across the ditch. At night, the air glows with the orange of burning rooftops outside the gate. Chroniclers describe the siege as relentless. The lady herself directs the final breach. Derby falls in a storm of shouts and horns. Many defenders die where they stand. Others swear fealty and are spared. Ethelfled mourns her dead. Things dear to her, the record says, but she holds the town and fortifies it anew. Derby's capture becomes a symbol. The Danelaw can bleed. The ripple of that victory spreads through every borough. Leicester braces for attack. Lincoln strengthens its riverside walls. Nottingham, halfway between friend and foe, sends gifts southward in cautious diplomacy. For the first time in a generation, English banners fly above strongholds once ruled by Danes. The frontier bends inward like a bow drawn to its limit. Peace offers no rest. The following year brings a wave of raids from East Anglia, where new leaders rise among the Danes determined to reclaim honour. Edward meets them near Bedford, turning their charge into rout. Each triumph yields territory. Each fortress becomes another anchor. By 915, Mercia and Wessex have stitched together a continuous belt of fortifications from the Severn to the Wash. The net tightens around the heart of the Danelaw. Through all this, Ethelfled's legend grows. Envoys from Wales call her the Lady of Victory. Poets compare her to Judith, the warrior maiden of Scripture. She governs from Tamworth, her council filled with advisors fluent in both Saxon and Danish law. Trade revives under her protection. Churches reopen in towns newly taken. Even some Norse settlers prefer her rule to that of distant jarls. They find her judgments predictable, her taxes fair. In that paradox lies her strength, conquest delivered through stability. Yet the campaign carries cost. Fields around the frontier lie trampled. Villages burned, rebuilt, and burned again. The land itself bears the memory of conflict. Travellers pass mounds where the fallen of both sides rest together, their graves unmarked except for small wooden stakes. Still, the marches continue. In 917, English forces advance along 2 axes, Edward from the south, Ethelfled from the west, closing like jaws upon the remaining boroughs. At Leicester, the defenders prepare for a last stand. Their walls rise from Roman foundations. Their pride runs even deeper. But internal strife weakens them. Merchants favor negotiation. Warriors insist on resistance. When Ethelfled's army appears on the horizon, divisions widen into surrender. The gates open, and Leicester yields without siege. The lady enters the city not as conqueror, but as sovereign. She restores its markets, confirms its laws, and leaves a garrison loyal to Mercia. Her march continues north toward York, where rumour claims both opportunity and danger await. Within months, the remaining boroughs, Nottingham, Lincoln, and Stamford, submit in sequence. some through battle, others through treaty. By the summer of 918, the Danelaw south of the Humber bends to English command. Edward receives envoys offering allegiance. Ethelflaed secures oaths of loyalty. The conquest completes what her father began, the recreation of a united England, at least in vision. But unity brings its own burden. The people of the 5 boroughs, though subdued, retain their customs. Edward must decide whether to erase or incorporate them. His advisors urge replacement of Danish law with royal statute. Others warn that such haste could undo peace. Edward chooses patience. He allows local assemblies to continue, demanding only tribute and loyalty. The Danelaw becomes a province within the kingdom rather than a captive. In this choice lies the seed of enduring integration. When Ethelflaed dies later that same year, her achievements stand unmatched. She leaves behind a Mercia restored in strength and allied to Wessex through blood and purpose. Chroniclers describe her passing as the fading of a star, yet the legacy she shapes endures. The idea that England can be forged through cooperation as much as conquest. In the towns she captured, life resumes. Markets reopen under new banners. Churches ring bells over streets that still bear Danish names. The children who grow up there hear 2 languages in their homes and speak a third, an English born of both. Traders cross the border freely again, and craftsmen rebuild with the same vigor that once made the Danelaw thrive. War has changed rulers, not people. The North remains the North, practical, stubborn, and proud. As autumn descends over the Midlands, the rivers fill with the glow of sunset. The campaign season ends, and soldiers return to their homes. Across the reclaimed land, silence spreads, a silence heavy with potential. Edward looks toward the future, knowing that consolidation will prove harder than conquest. Yet for the first time since the longships appeared on the horizon of Lindisfarne, England stands on the edge of wholeness. The Danelaw, born from invasion, becomes part of the same story it once defied. And in the heart of every newly English town, the echo of dual heritage endures. The rhythm of the hammer on the anvil, the chant of monks beside the hum of merchants, the mingled accents of 2 peoples who have learned, through struggle, to share a single destiny. Autumn settles over the reclaimed Midlands. Smoke from harvest fires drifts through the valleys, once patrolled by Danish riders. The clang of forges replaces the drum of hooves, and the banners of Wessex flutter where the raven once flew. Across Mercia, Edward the Elder consolidates the hard-won peace of his sister's campaigns. The 5 boroughs stand subdued, yet alive with cautious energy. Their markets hum, their rivers carry trade, and their people weigh the cost of submission against the promise of stability. Edward governs from Winchester, but thinks of England as a single living body whose limbs must now be stitched together. He sends reeves and clerks northward, men skilled in record-keeping rather than war. Their task is simple: count, measure, and restore. They survey farmland, assess tribute, and note who among the Danes remains loyal. The king's scribes translate local law into royal charters, turning memory into text. What began as conquest evolves into administration. The new order grows around fortresses built during the wars. Each burh becomes both shield and marketplace. Merchants gather under the watch of garrisons, paying tolls that fund repairs and roadwork. Churches rise beside these walls, consecrated by bishops travelling under royal escort. The network of strongholds, Warwick, Stafford, Nottingham, Derby, forms a lattice of power that links the Midlands to Wessex. Through it, Edward projects authority deeper than any king before him. In the north, Lincoln remains the most prosperous of the old Danish cities. Its jarls, now styled as ealdormen, swear fealty while retaining local command. They collect taxes in silver, send tribute south, and receive trade privileges in return. The arrangement suits both sides. Edward gains revenue and loyalty. The lords preserve their autonomy. Law holds because it serves interest as well as justice. Language continues to blend through necessity. Royal clerks learn Norse terms for measurement and property. Danish merchants adopt English phrases for contracts and tribute. The hybrid tongue that forms in the courts of the Danelaw carries authority across regions. Its clarity will later shape the rhythm of written English, short, exact, and suited for record. Ethelflaed's death in 918 leaves a vacuum that Edward fills carefully. The Mercians, proud of their lady, accept his overlordship on condition of respect for her legacy. He honors the pledge. No tribute is raised beyond what she imposed. No local governor is replaced without cause. By restraint, he achieves what war alone could not: allegiance. Within a year, the banners of Wessex and Mercia hang side by side from the towers of Leicester and Nottingham. From the north, envoys arrive bearing news of unrest in York. Rival claimants contest the throne left empty by the deaths of Northumbria's Danish kings. Edward senses opportunity. He dispatches emissaries offering alliance to those willing to recognize his sovereignty. Some agree out of pragmatism, others from fear. For the first time, the idea of an English realm stretching from Channel to Humber enters the realm of policy rather than prophecy. In the boroughs, adjustment continues. Craftsmen repair bridges destroyed during the wars. Mills along the Trent resume grinding grain. Trade routes reopen toward London, and the markets of Stamford once again host fairs that draw merchants from across the island. With peace comes growth, and with growth comes taxation. Yet even under new levies, the towns prosper. The currency minted at Lincoln circulates widely, bearing Edward's name on one side and the cross of St. Martin on the other, a symbol of union between old and new orders. Religion aids the process of reconciliation. Missionaries travel through the countryside, baptizing those who seek favor at court, while priests of Danish birth retain their parishes under the same bishops who once cursed them. The church becomes a mediator between cultures, teaching obedience through ritual rather than force. Feast days multiply. Saints from both traditions share the calendar. The altar unites what the battlefield divided. Meanwhile, the next generation rises in confidence. Sons of Danish settlers serve as royal soldiers. English youths apprentice under northern merchants. In taverns, laughter carries accents from both coasts of the North Sea. Each exchange dissolves another layer of difference. Identity ceases to depend on ancestry and begins to rest on allegiance. To call oneself English now implies loyalty to Edward's law more than to lineage. The king senses this transformation and encourages it. He issues decrees standardizing weights, measures, and tolls across his domains. The aim is not assimilation, but efficiency. A merchant from Lincoln must be able to trade in Winchester without confusion. The law that allows him to do so becomes the first true national system in England's history. It binds regions together, not through fear, but through habit. Peace never stands without testing. In 920, a coalition of Norse lords gathers in the north, hoping to challenge Edward's expansion. They march toward the Humber, expecting rebellion among the newly conquered boroughs. None comes. The towns close their gates, content with the security they now enjoy. Edward advances with measured confidence, fortified by loyalty rather than numbers. The enemy withdraws before battle. The retreat marks the moment when the Danelaw ceases to be frontier and becomes part of the realm. Within a decade, Edward's rule extends over almost all England. When he dies in 924, his son Ethelstan inherits not a divided island, but a framework of unity. The lessons learned in the wars of the Danelaw guide his reign. He continues his father's policy of integration, rewarding Danish nobles who swear loyalty and granting them lands in the same measure as their English peers. Under him, the idea of an English nation moves from ambition to reality. The 5 boroughs play a central role in this emergence. Their trade sustains the crown. Their mixed population provides a model for coexistence. In their courts, the law of the Dane becomes indistinguishable from the law of the king. When disputes arise, assemblies cite both traditions, merging precedent with royal command. What once symbolized division now represents fusion. The Danelaw, designed to separate, evolves into the foundation of unity. As prosperity returns, art and learning flourish. Monks in Lincoln illuminate gospels with northern motifs, interlaced beasts coiled around Christian verses. Jewelers craft brooches shaped like ravens crowned with crosses. The imagery captures a civilization at peace with its dual nature. Writers record the deeds of Alfred, Edward, and Ethelflaed as chapters of one story, not rival legacies. Through them, the island begins to perceive itself as single inheritance. Yet under the calm surface, ambition never sleeps. Across the sea, new leaders in Denmark and Norway hear of England's wealth and unity. They view the northern towns as natural allies, bound by blood and language. In their courts, the idea of renewed conquest stirs again. For now, the storms remain distant, but merchants in Lincoln whisper of strange sails sighted beyond the Humber. The memory of invasion lingers in every harbour. Inside England, consolidation continues. Ethelstan strengthens royal administration, establishing councils that include nobles from both sides of the old divide. He issues charters confirming property rights to Danish lords, securing their loyalty through legitimacy. Trade treaties extend across the Channel to Flanders and the Rhine, enriching the boroughs even further. The economy that once belonged to raiders now belongs to accountants and shipmasters. By mid-century, the 5 boroughs stand transformed. Leicester grows into a centre of metalwork. Lincoln surpasses older ports as a hub of commerce. Nottingham becomes renowned for cloth and leather. Derby's craftsmen forge weapons for the royal army, while Stamford hosts fairs that attract merchants from as far as the Loire. Each city carries the memory of conquest, but expresses it through productivity. They are monuments to adaptation, not defeat. The countryside around them mirrors this progress. Estates divided during the wars merge under new ownership. Danish farmsteads evolve into manorial villages organized around churches rather than halls. The people work the same soil, but under a different sense of belonging. Harvest festivals celebrate peace as their greatest yield. Songs sung in taverns praise not war, but endurance, the virtue that kept both cultures alive. In the chronicles of the age, the Danelaw begins to fade as a distinct term. Scribes speak instead of England in its entirety. The change in language reflects a change in perception. The frontier no longer defines identity. Shared law does. The sons of conquerors and the descendants of the conquered now stand equal before the same court. That achievement, more than any battle, marks the true counterstroke of the Anglo-Saxons. Victory through absorption. When twilight falls over Lincoln, its towers catch the last glimmer of sun. Below them, the streets hum with trade. the same rhythm that once bound Danish and English merchants under wary peace. Children chase one another between stalls where silver and grain trade hands. The city's bells ring in a language older than division, their echoes carried along the river toward the sea. In that sound lies the memory of transformation, the journey from war to order, from boundary to nation. At dawn, the walls of Lincoln catch the first light of the eastern sky. Mist hangs over the river, drifting through the arches of old Roman stone. Merchants are already awake, unpacking bales of cloth, fish, and metalwork brought in during the night. A scent of salt and iron fills the air. The city hums like a forge, alive with purpose. Lincoln stands at the heart of the Danelaw, a fortress that has become a marketplace, a capital of enterprise and exchange. From its gates stretch roads that lead to every corner of the 5 boroughs. Southward lies Stamford, bright with river trade and the clatter of workshops. To the west, Leicester rises among fertile valleys. Northward, Derby guards the frontier with Mercia, and beyond the hills stands Nottingham, holding the river routes that cross the Midlands. Together, these towns shape a new kind of order, forged not by decree, but by habit, strengthened by the shared rhythm of trade and law. Inside each borough, wooden streets give way to paved courtyards where the Thing, the public assembly, meets beneath open sky. Men gather in a circle, their cloaks dusted with mud, their swords left at the gate. The Jarl presides from a carved bench, flanked by elders who speak with measured tone. Disputes are settled through witness and oath. Each case concludes with silver or livestock offered as restitution. The process brings pride as much as justice. The law of the North is spoken aloud, not written in a king's chamber, but lived among the people who must obey it. In these assemblies, loyalty matters more than lineage. A farmer who ploughs his field and keeps his word earns equal respect to a warrior who fought beside Halfdan. The Thing binds community through reputation, not title. From it grows a sense of belonging broader than birth, a civic spirit that holds the Danelaw together. Beyond the town gates, the countryside thrives. Villages expand across the plains of Lincolnshire and Nottinghamshire, their names carrying echoes of distant coasts: Grimsby, Thoresby, Althorpe, Ragby. Each name marks a place claimed by settlers, yet also by the generations that followed them. Timber farmhouses rise on earthen mounds, surrounded by grazing cattle and fields of barley. The layout of the land itself changes, divided into strips and commons, measured by the Danish karukate rather than the Saxon hide. Boundaries are marked by ditches and posts carved with runes, simple and enduring. Trade fuels this prosperity. The Humber, the Trent, and the Witham form a triangle of movement linking the inland boroughs to the open sea. From Lincoln's quays, ships sail east, carrying wool and ironwork, returning with furs, amber, and silver. Nottingham draws merchants from both sides of the frontier. Leicester serves as a crossroads between north and south. Derby, once a border fortress, becomes a hub for livestock and leather. Stamford grows famous for its fairs, attracting buyers from Wessex and even from across the Channel. The Danelaw breathes through commerce, and its people measure wealth not only in land, but in connection. Markets mirror this blend of worlds. On a typical day, a Saxon woman sells woven cloth beside a Dane, offering salted fish. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer mingles with the chant of a merchant weighing silver coins. Children shout in a language that borrows from both tongues, their speech smooth and swift, rich in rhythm. Every trade carries fragments of identity. Every bargain reinforces coexistence. At night, the towns glimmer with the light of hearths. Alehouses fill with sailors and craftsmen exchanging stories. Skalds sing of the voyages that brought their fathers here. Priests speak of salvation. Few see contradiction between the two. Faith and folklore share the same space. A carved cross might stand above a doorway marked with protective runes. The people of the boroughs embrace both, believing that strength comes from honoring every source of wisdom. Rulers adapt to this new reality. Jarls maintain order through counsel rather than command. Their authority rests on consensus and generosity, the ability to reward loyalty, settle disputes, and defend their borders. Tribute flows upward, but so does responsibility. Each Jarl sends silver and soldiers to York when called, acknowledging the overlordship of the northern kings. Yet within their own walls, they govern as independent lords, trusted more than distant monarchs. Coins reflect this balance. Some bear the names of kings in York. Others carry Christian symbols or abstract designs. A few display the image of Saint Martin, patron of Lincoln, whose cult grows alongside northern tradition. These small discs of silver pass through countless hands, binding every class of the Danelaw to a single economy. A craftsman's hammer, a farmer's spade, a merchant's scale. Each tool depends on the trust those coins represent. The language of law evolves with the land. Old English blends with Old Norse, forming a new dialect clear and direct, suited for speech rather than ceremony. Words like thing, lag, husband, fellow enter common use, carrying meanings of duty and association. They speak of partnership, of responsibility shared among equals. In every borough, language becomes the unseen charter of this new order. The church adjusts to its surroundings. Priests preach in mixed tongues, translating Latin scripture into words farmers understand. Monasteries rebuilt after the wars adopt northern artistry, interlaced beasts, coiled serpents, intricate patterns that recall the ships that once brought fire. Faith becomes local, shaped by the people, rather than imposed upon them. On feast days, processions move through streets lined with both crosses and dragon banners, symbols of heritage that no longer stand opposed. Across the Danelaw, roads improve under this steady peace. Bridges of oak replace old fords. Milestones mark distance in both English and Norse measure. Caravans travel safely under the protection of local lords who profit from their passage. News spreads quickly, carried by traders who act as messengers between boroughs. A rumour in Lincoln can reach Nottingham within a day, Leicester by nightfall. This speed of communication gives the region unity rare in the early Middle Ages. Even architecture begins to express confidence. In Lincoln, new buildings rise upon Roman foundations. In Derby and Leicester, craftsmen carve door frames with geometric motifs borrowed from northern art. The contrast between wooden halls and stone structures fades as both styles merge. The boroughs grow in size and ambition. They are no longer garrisons in a conquered land. They are the cities of a nation in formation. Among the most influential figures of this generation are the merchant families who control trade across the rivers. Men like Eric of Lincoln and Oswald of Stamford maintain fleets of barges that carry goods between sea and inland. Their loyalty shifts not by blood, but by profit. They serve any power that ensures stability. Through them, the wealth of the Danelaw circulates, funding walls, mints, and festivals that celebrate the prosperity of peace. These decades create the foundation for an identity distinct yet intertwined with the rest of England. Children born in the boroughs grow up hearing tales of both Ragnar and Alfred, saints and skalds sharing equal space in their imagination. Their education takes place in the open air, at markets, at assemblies, at the side of forges. They learn arithmetic from traders, strategy from veterans, and scripture from traveling monks. The result is a generation fluent in dual heritage, confident in its difference and aware of its strength. The influence of the Danelaw extends far beyond its borders. Mercian farmers adopt Scandinavian tools and crop rotation methods. Wessex merchants mimic northern trading practices. Even language in the south begins to shift, absorbing words that carry the rhythm of the north. What began as conquest has transformed into integration. The border that once divided England now acts as an artery through which culture and commerce flow. Amid this growth, memory of the old wars recedes but never disappears. Songs about Ivar, Guthrum, and Alfred remain part of the oral tradition. They serve as reminders of how fragile peace can be. Yet the people of the Danelaw no longer look back in fear. They view those stories as their inheritance, a past of struggle that led to present strength. In the evenings, elders retell them beside the hearth, shaping them into parables of endurance rather than victory. By the end of the 9th century, the 5 boroughs stand as pillars of civilization. Each governs its hinterland, trades with its neighbors, and upholds a shared legal tradition. Together, they form the spine of a region that stretches from the fens to the Pennines. Its people no longer think of themselves as subjects of conquest, but as participants in creation. The Danelaw has become more than a line on a treaty. It is a living network of towns and fields, laws and loyalties, united by purpose. At sunset, Lincoln's streets glow with the reflection of firelight on wet stone. The bells ring for evening prayers, answered by distant horns calling the watch. From the walls, the view stretches across a landscape calm and fertile. Wind moves through the fields like a slow tide. The same rivers that once carried invaders now carry trade and conversation. The land breathes differently, settled yet restless, aware that history seldom stands still. Beyond the horizon, forces gather once again, ambitions of kings who see unity where others see balance. But for now, the 5 boroughs flourish, strong in their independence and secure in their rhythm. Their foundations lie deep in the soil of 2 peoples who have learned, for a time, to share it. And from that shared strength will soon emerge the next great struggle, when peace itself becomes the prize worth fighting for. Across the plains of Mercia, roads converge toward Leicester. Wagons creak under the weight of grain, iron, and wool. Riders in fur cloaks pass messages sealed in wax. The town stands where rivers and trade routes meet, a heart of movement surrounded by quiet farmland. Its Roman walls, once broken, have been mended with new stone. Watchtowers rise above tiled roofs, their fires visible from miles away. Below, the marketplace swells with merchants, priests, and soldiers mingling in the same narrow streets. Leicester's rhythm mirrors that of the entire Danelaw. The settlement has outgrown the memory of conquest, and now thrives as a node in a web of commerce stretching from the Humber to the Thames. Stalls display cloth dyed in Wessex blues, beside furs from the Baltic coast. In the evening, the taverns fill with stories of voyages across every sea that touches England's shore. The language heard inside them sounds neither fully Saxon nor fully Norse. It is the blended tongue of a people learning to speak together. This is the Danelaw in its maturity, a society confident in its mixture, sustained by the discipline of habit rather than the fear of invasion. The Jarls who rule its towns govern through familiarity. They sit in their halls, surrounded by elders and merchants, listening to petitions and weighing disputes. Authority rests not on decree, but on reputation. The man who judges fairly gains power. The one who rules with arrogance loses it. Over time, this unwritten rule shapes a form of governance more stable than the hierarchies it replaced. Derby governs with a practical hand. Its Jarl, Eirik Ketilsson, keeps peace through trade agreements rather than raids. He sponsors road repairs, ensures that bridges remain open in winter, and sends gifts to Mercian nobles beyond the border. The farmers under his protection prosper, and with prosperity comes loyalty. Similar stories unfold in Lincoln and Nottingham, where leadership depends on competence as much as bloodline. Even rival jarls exchange letters carried by trusted messengers, recognizing that cooperation secures what conquest once promised. Religion continues its slow transformation within this framework. The wooden churches of the boroughs stand where longhouses once held feasts. Candles burn beside carved beasts of northern art, their wings curling around the shape of the cross. The clergy learn to address mixed congregations, explaining scripture through the imagery of both traditions. A homily might compare Christ's courage to that of Sigurd, or the parable of the prodigal son to the return of a sea-roving warrior. In this blend of voices, the divine speaks with local resonance. Festivals provide moments when faith and culture intertwine. At midsummer, fires blaze on the hills around Lincoln, recalling both pagan celebration and Christian vigil. Families gather with music, food, and drink, thanking heaven for peace and harvest. The sound of flutes carries over the fields. Dancers trace circles around the flames. These gatherings forge a shared calendar that unites newcomers and natives under the same season of joy. Education expands through monasteries, rebuilt after the wars. The abbots of Crowland and Peterborough reopened scriptoria, employing both English and Danish scribes. Manuscripts copied there combined Latin text with marginal notes in a new hybrid language. Young scholars travel between these centers and the boroughs, learning not only theology, but also trade arithmetic and law. Their training equips them to serve as clerks, record keepers, and diplomats, the administrative backbone of a realm no longer divided by sword. Economy shapes culture as deeply as belief. The Danelaw's position between sea and interior grants it unmatched advantage. From York to Stamford, roads hum with movement. Caravans loaded with salt, wool, and tin travel south toward London. Ships from Denmark and Frisia deliver timber, wine, and glass. Each exchange widens the horizon. The merchant who once measured his life by a single village now speaks of distant ports as part of his livelihood. Prosperity teaches curiosity. In Lincoln, workshops along the river ring with hammering that never ceases. Blacksmiths produce tools, nails, and hinges in quantities that suggest mass trade rather than local use. In Leicester, potters shape hundreds of jars for grain storage, their kilns burning day and night. Nottingham's weavers export cloth dyed with imported woad. Stamford, famed for its markets, attracts buyers from as far as Normandy. The Danelaw thrives because its energy flows outward. It sells the idea of stability to anyone who will pay for it. Underneath this visible success lies a quieter revolution. The law courts of the boroughs develop systems of record. Clerks begin to tally fines, land transfers, and contracts. What began as oral tradition gains permanence in ink. Though few documents survive, the practice of written accountability spreads rapidly. Justice becomes less personal, more procedural. The Danelaw, founded by men who distrusted kings, invents the habits that will one day define English administration. Among common folk, life assumes a rhythm that previous generations could scarcely imagine. Farmers work the same fields year after year, confident that next spring will bring peace rather than fire. Families invest in sturdier houses, planting orchards beside them. Children grow tall in stability. Elders live long enough to remember both the chaos and the calm that followed. This continuity creates memory, and memory becomes identity. Even warfare changes character. The raids of earlier decades give way to formal campaigns waged for tribute rather than destruction. When disputes arise between the Danelaw and Wessex, armies march in measured order. Battles are planned around harvest seasons, and negotiations follow swiftly after. Combat becomes a tool of diplomacy rather than its failure. It is a dangerous refinement, but one that signals maturity. Across the border, the kings of Wessex watch these developments with caution. Alfred's successors, Edward and his sister, Ethelflaed, study the Danelaw's methods as carefully as they plan its eventual reconquest. They see that strength now lies not in the sword, but in administration, not in conquest, but in endurance. The stability of the 5 boroughs presents both a challenge and a model. Every fortress built in Wessex reflects lessons learned from Danish towns. Organized defense, shared labor, communal law. The line between imitation and rivalry grows thin. For the people living within the Danelaw, politics remains distant. What matters is the security of trade routes, the fairness of assemblies, and the promise that tomorrow will resemble today. Markets flourish under predictability. Faith deepens under peace. In taverns and halls, travelers share news from across the sea. Rumors of fresh migrations from Norway, of wars in Ireland, of kings rising and falling in Scandinavia. The boroughs listen but rarely act. Their energy stays rooted in maintenance, not expansion. The climate favors them. Mild summers and strong harvests enrich the countryside. Craftsmen refine techniques passed down from both traditions. In Lincoln, jewelers set garnets into silver mounts shaped like ravens. In Derby, carpenters perfect interlocking joints for long halls. Artisans sign their work with simple runic marks, signatures of pride rather than ownership. Beauty arises not from luxury, but from mastery. By the early 10th century, the Danelaw commands respect throughout England. Its towns are prosperous, its people disciplined, its culture distinct. Traders from Wessex acknowledge that the best iron comes from Lincoln, the finest cloth from Nottingham, the most reliable coin from York. The region's reputation for honesty in trade becomes legend. Even royal messengers travelling through its roads carry letters marked with seals of northern jarls, symbols of a parallel authority that endures beside the English crown. Yet prosperity brings its own tension. Wealth attracts ambition. Younger leaders, born after the wars, see opportunity where their fathers saw survival. Some dream of wider dominion, others of independence from both York and Wessex. The shared order that once united the boroughs begins to show fractures along lines of pride. Eirik of Derby demands higher tolls from merchants travelling toward Leicester. In Lincoln, rival guilds dispute control of the docks. These quarrels remain local, but they hint at a shifting balance. Beyond these towns, distant tides stir. In the north, new settlers arrive from Norway, driven westward by overpopulation and famine. In the east, fleets gather under kings who look toward England with renewed hunger. News of these movements reaches the Danelaw through travellers and spies. Some jarls strengthen their defences. Others prepare to negotiate, uncertain whether the next arrivals will be friends or conquerors. Even as uncertainty grows, the daily life of the Danelaw continues in remarkable order. Markets open at dawn. The clang of the blacksmith echoes through Leicester's narrow lanes. Children recite prayers in mixed tongues before running to schoolhouses maintained by the church. At sunset, the rivers glow red beneath the setting sun, and fishermen pull in their nets heavy with eels and perch. The rhythm of survival has turned into culture, a pattern resilient enough to absorb change. When night falls over Lincoln, the city rests in its own light. From the walls, sentries watch the countryside fade into darkness, listening to the steady rush of the Witham below. Somewhere beyond the horizon, other fires burn, armies gathering, kings planning. Yet inside these walls, order holds. The Danelaw has achieved what once seemed impossible, an enduring peace built by those who once came to destroy. This peace will not last forever, but its legacy already reaches beyond its borders. The boroughs have taught England a lesson no victory could deliver, that stability arises from understanding, not conquest. In the decades to come, as Wessex turns its gaze northward again, the model forged here will guide the shape of the emerging kingdom. The law of the Dane will live on in the courts of the English, and the memory of the 5 boroughs will outlast every king who claimed to rule them. Morning sunlight touches the towers of Lincoln and glides across the valley toward the Humber. Smoke rises from 100 hearths. The air smells of salt, grain, and wet timber. A generation has passed since the banners of the Raven were lowered from these walls. The city still speaks in the mixed accents of its forebears, but the banners now bear the cross of the English kings. The Danelaw endures, no longer as a rival realm, but as a living region within a greater kingdom. The people have grown accustomed to English rule. Taxes arrive on time. Disputes reach the royal courts without rebellion, and soldiers patrol roads once haunted by raiders. Yet the soul of the land remains distinct. In Lincolnshire and the Trent Valley, names, customs, and patterns of speech still echo the northern past. The Danelaw does not vanish. It adjusts, adapting its law to serve a new crown. King Ethelstan governs with deliberate balance. His rule extends from the Channel to the northern moors. But the Danelaw requires special care. Here, authority rests on trust more than decree. The king travels north frequently, holding assemblies in the boroughs to reaffirm loyalty. His court is a blend of languages and origins. Mercian nobles beside Danish jarls, bishops beside merchants from York and Dublin. Each carries influence born of trade and alliance rather than birth alone. Ethelstan recognizes that strength lies in continuity. He allows local customs to remain, provided they align with royal justice. In Lincoln, the Thing still meets in open air to judge disputes. Its verdicts are now recorded by clerks trained in Latin, yet the spirit of community persists. The court of the king respects its outcomes, integrating the old oral law into the written codes of England. What once divided realms becomes a tool of governance. Across the Danelaw, prosperity returns. The boroughs hum with trade. Silver flows like river water. Lincoln's mint produces coins that travel the length of the kingdom. Leicester refines iron for weapons and tools. Nottingham supplies leather and cloth. At Stamford, ships unload wine from the continent, and fairs draw traders from Flanders and the Rhine. The Danelaw thrives because its people understand the value of exchange. They build wealth through movement, linking England to the northern world of commerce that stretches from the Irish Sea to the Baltic. In the countryside, farms expand beyond their earlier enclosures. Stone replaces timber in hall and barn. Fields of barley and rye wave across the plains, divided by hedgerows and ditches maintained under shared law. Landowners, English, Danish, or mixed in lineage, manage estates through stewards who apply both traditions. The English reeve and the Danish britae serve side by side. Their cooperation becomes a quiet symbol of unity. Religion deepens its roots in this renewed peace. Churches rise where pagan shrines once stood, yet their art retains northern form. Stone crosses bear serpents, birds, and interlaced beasts curling around sacred figures. The church does not erase memory, it sanctifies it. Bishops from Worcester and York travel through the Danelaw, blessing altars built by hands that once wielded axes. Monks translate scriptures into the language of the people, infusing English Christianity with a northern cadence. The Christianization of the North changes not only faith but identity. Baptism replaces blood oath as the bond of community. Markets open with prayer. Merchants trade under the sign of the cross drawn above scales. The rhythm of the church calendar sets the pace of life. Lent, Easter, Michaelmas, Yule. Yet in the long winter nights, fireside tales still recount the sagas of the old gods, their echoes softened but not forgotten. The Danelaw's spirituality becomes layered, pious in observance, mythic in memory. Ethelstan fosters learning as part of this integration. Scholars from across the British Isles gather in his court, among them men of northern birth whose grandfathers once sailed as raiders. They translate works of law, scripture, and science into English, building a literary culture that bridges regions. The king encourages monasteries to serve as schools for the sons of merchants and thanes alike. At Lincoln, young men study under both clerics and artisans, learning letters and measurements with equal respect. Education becomes an instrument of unity. The reach of trade expands alongside learning. Ships from Lincoln and Grimsby sail north to Bergen, east to Ribe and Hedeby, and south to the mouth of the Seine. They carry wool, tin, salt, and finely crafted metalwork. In return come furs, honey, amber, and wine. The Danelaw's merchants, fluent in both English and Norse tongues, act as intermediaries between realms. Their voyages turn England from an island power into a node of a continental network. Every journey adds to the wealth of the crown and the confidence of the region. In daily life, the influence of the North endures quietly. Architecture favors sturdy lines and practical symmetry. Houses cluster around courtyards rather than long halls. Market squares become civic centers where law, trade, and worship converge. Music carries rhythms brought from Scandinavia, measured beats that accompany both dance and prayer. The Danelaw's people no longer define themselves by conquest, but by craft. They build, weave, forge, and sing with equal devotion. In the royal records, the former Danelaw appears as the Northern Shires, administrative units that reflect both geography and history. Lincolnshire, Derbyshire, Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire, and the lands around Stamford form a chain of order. Each shire elects reeves, collects taxes, and maintains its own local courts. The system is efficient because it grows from tradition rather than replacement. The English monarchy learns to rule through absorption, drawing strength from difference instead of suppressing it. During Ethelstan's reign, the Danelaw contributes not only wealth but soldiers. Its warriors fight beside their southern kin, in campaigns against the Scots and Norse kings who threaten from beyond the borders. The Battle of Brunanburh, fought in 937, becomes the test of this newfound unity. Armies from every shire march under one banner, the sons of Wessex, Mercia, and the North standing shoulder to shoulder. The chroniclers describe a single nation rising against the invader. The field runs red, but the victory is complete. England, forged in decades of division, proves its strength in shared purpose. After Brunanburh, Ethelstan's reputation spreads across Europe. Envoys from the continent address him as King of the English and ruler of all Britain. The Danelaw, once a separate dominion, stands as his greatest achievement, a land integrated without erasure. Its jarls become ealdormen of the crown, its merchants serve as ambassadors of trade. The lines once drawn by war now serve as roads of communication. When Ethelstan dies in 939, the balance he built remains fragile but functional. His successors inherit a realm that depends on both tradition and adaptation. The Danelaw's independence has faded, but its customs continue to influence royal policy. The assembly at Lincoln still meets. The language of law retains its northern clarity. Even as southern scribes refine grammar and script, the vocabulary of the Danelaw shapes the English tongue, practical, terse, and direct. Under King Edmund, and later Edred, the old Danish territories experience further integration. Royal messengers travel freely between Winchester and York, carrying edicts that apply to all subjects alike. Monasteries rebuild libraries destroyed in past wars. Trade routes extend into Scotland and the Irish Sea, knitting the island into a single economic web. The once divided kingdoms of Britain begin to sense a collective destiny. For the people of the Danelaw, these decades bring contentment. Families who survived the turmoil of earlier generations now enjoy continuity. Land passes peacefully from father to son. Daughters marry into neighboring estates, blending bloodlines long divided by war. At harvest festivals, English and Danish songs merge into shared celebration. History itself becomes an inheritance rather than a wound. The landscape bears witness to this new stability. Fortresses from the wars now stand as market towns. The mounds that once marked sieges bloom with wheat. Rivers that carried invaders now carry merchants. The sound of oars is no longer a warning, but a promise of arrival. Across the northern shires, the pulse of England beats steady and confident. Even in peace, memory remains watchful. The people remember how quickly fortune can change. They maintain walls, repair bridges, and train militias, not from fear, but from discipline. The generation raised under Ethelstan understands that order must be tended like a field. Law, once imposed by conquerors, has become their own creation. As winter gathers over the Humber, lights shimmer in the windows of Lincoln. Merchants count coins by candlelight. Monks chant vespers behind stone walls. Farmers mend tools beside quiet hearths. Outside the city, the river glows silver under the moon. It flows toward the sea that once delivered destruction, now carrying ships laden with English goods and northern pride. The Danelaw has transformed from frontier to foundation, a pillar of the kingdom it once resisted, a testament to endurance through adaptation. Winter settles deep across the northern shires. Frost hardens the rivers, and the wind carries the scent of peat fires from valley to valley. Within Lincoln's walls, merchants store their ledgers. Priests seal the churches against the cold, and blacksmiths hammer until sparks fill the dusk. Peace has matured into habit. The Danelaw, once a land of frontiers and treaties, has become part of England's living core. Yet beneath its calm surface, history turns quietly toward its next transformation. King Edmund, Ethelstan's half-brother, continues the work of unifying the realm. His reign begins with rebellion in the north, but it ends with stability. He restores the balance of local authority that made his predecessors' rule endure. In the Danelaw, he confirms charters of land ownership to Danish families who have long served the crown. Their estates, once taken by sword, now exist through royal writ. The shift from conquest to legitimacy alters the soul of the region more profoundly than any battle. Each borough reflects this new order. Derby rebuilds its walls in stone, its towers bearing carved crosses beside images of serpents and beasts. Nottingham, at the meeting of rivers and roads, grows into a major centre of craft and exchange. Lincoln, larger and wealthier than ever, serves as a mint for royal coinage. Leicester hosts one of the kingdom's most active markets for wool and metal. Stamford, straddling the southern border of the old Danelaw, stands as a bridge between cultures. Its fairs draw merchants from London and York alike. These towns are no longer memories of a vanished realm. They are arteries of a nation. Law governs their prosperity. The assemblies of the Danelaw, once open-air gatherings, evolve into structured courts. Clerks record verdicts on parchment. Reeves collect fines for the king's treasury. The Verguild system, compensation for injury or death, remains central to justice, valued for its clarity and balance. It teaches restraint through accountability. Many English shires adopt similar codes, drawn by their efficiency. The Northern Way becomes the English way. Faith continues to shape daily rhythm. Bells ring across the valleys for matins and vespers. Monasteries prosper again. Their libraries fill with manuscripts in both Latin and English. The monks of Crowland and Peterborough illuminate texts that blend Christian stories with northern imagery. The art of the Danelaw carries a particular energy, lines interwoven like the histories that formed them. Crosses, serpents, and wings converge into a single design that speaks of redemption through endurance. The church also becomes an archive of ancestry. Priests keep records of births, marriages, and deaths, preserving family lines once traced only through oral tradition. Within a generation, the descendants of Danish settlers appear side by side with English names in these registers. The scribes who write them rarely mark distinction. Faith has replaced origin as the measure of belonging. Under Edmund's successor, Eadred, the last independent rulers of Northumbria submit to royal power. With York under English control, the Danelaw ceases to be frontier. It now lies at the kingdom's centre, a fertile plain linking north and south. Roads improve, bridges are fortified, and new settlements spread outward from the older boroughs. Trade moves along every river, the Witham, the Trent, the Derwent, carrying iron, cloth, and grain. The hum of travel becomes the music of peace. The influence of Norse artisanship endures through this age. In Leicester, smiths forge brooches shaped like wings or serpents. In Derby, carvers decorate church doors with knotwork patterns. In Lincoln, glassmakers produce windows tinted deep blue and green, their colours echoing the sea routes that connect the city to the north. Beauty becomes a form of remembrance, each object a quiet dialogue between past and present. Language evolves in tandem. The spoken English of the Danelaw grows leaner, faster, more direct. Grammar simplifies. Words shorten. Traders prefer precision. Farmers value clarity. The dialect that emerges in these towns spreads outward with trade, influencing speech far beyond the Midlands. It carries the rhythm of Norse phrasing, compact, muscular, and unadorned. In time, it will become the backbone of the national tongue. Governance also changes character. The kings of Wessex, now rulers of all England, adopt aspects of northern administration. Local councils handle taxation. The crown oversees justice and defence. This partnership strengthens the realm. Authority flows both upward and downward, ensuring flexibility and stability. The monarchy learns from the Danelaw how to balance freedom with duty. For the common people, life grows predictable and secure. Harvests fill granaries. Fairs return each season. Markets open at sunrise. their stalls bright with colour even in winter. A farmer from the fens sells salted fish beside a trader offering Flemish cloth. Children run between them carrying baskets of apples and cheese. The mingled scents of smoke, bread, and wool fill the air. Peace, once fragile, now feels permanent. Memory, however, still whispers. Elders tell stories of Guthrum, Alfred, and Ethelflaed, as if they had lived only yesterday. The younger generation listens with awe, but without resentment. To them, those names belong to legend, not grievance. The Danelaw has entered the realm of myth while remaining tangible in every aspect of life. Its lore, its words, its rhythms. Beyond England, the world shifts again. Across the North Sea, Denmark grows powerful under the rule of new kings who look toward the west with ambition. Their ships trade as often as they raid. The merchants of Lincoln know these men by name. Letters of credit and friendship cross the water long before armies ever will. The Danelaw's connection to the northern world remains strong, commercial, familial, and cultural. It is England's bridge to the seas that once brought danger. Under King Edgar, prosperity reaches a peak. His reign is remembered for harmony. He travels through the Danelaw by barge along the rivers, holding court in Lincoln and Nottingham, receiving homage from local lords. Chroniclers record the image of the king, steering his ship through calm waters, as 8 subordinate rulers row beside him, a ceremony that embodies unity. The Danelaw's allegiance is no longer coerced, it is celebrated. During Edgar's time, new churches rise with towers of stone and bells that mark the hours across open countryside. Markets expand beyond walls, creating suburbs of craftsmen and traders. Education spreads. Schools attached to monasteries teach reading, writing, and arithmetic to the sons of merchants. The people of the north, once feared for ferocity, now become known for learning and enterprise. The transformation of the Danelaw is complete. Even art reflects this maturity. Stone crosses along the roads bear inscriptions in English verse, blending Christian devotion with northern imagery. Poets compose hymns that praise peace as the highest victory. Their words travel south, influencing the monasteries of Winchester and Canterbury. What began as cultural fusion becomes national identity. Yet every period of harmony prepares the stage for change. As Edgar's reign wanes, England's stability depends increasingly on his careful balance between local autonomy and royal oversight. His death leaves a vacuum that future kings will struggle to fill. For now, though, the Danelaw stands as proof that order can grow from contradiction. The descendants of warriors have become builders of law. The land once divided by faith now unites under a single creed. When snow covers the fields of Lincolnshire, the countryside gleams under pale moonlight. The roads leading from each borough glisten with ice. Yet wagons still move, their wheels wrapped in rope for traction. Along the riverbanks, fishermen mend their nets by lantern light. In the distance, the sound of bells travels through the night air. These small images, men at work, light on water, voices in the cold, speak more truly of England's triumph than any chronicle of war. In the halls of Lincoln, clerks copy royal laws into neat columns. The ink smells faintly of oak and soot. Their quills scratch steadily across parchment, recording the statutes that define a kingdom now whole. The words mix Latin and English, yet between them lies another spirit, the unspoken legacy of the Danelaw, whose law of fairness and assembly shaped the conscience of a nation. As dawn returns, the mists lift from the river. The spires of churches gleam above the rooftops. The first carts of the day roll toward the market square. The city stirs with confidence born of time. From the sea to the highlands, from Wessex to York, the same rhythm echoes. Fields tended, roads repaired, prayers offered. The unity long sought through war has been achieved through endurance. The Danelaw, transformed by peace, stands at the heart of that achievement. Its strength measured not in conquest, but in continuity. Storms return to the North Sea. The wind that once carried traders now bears fleets of warriors. Along the coasts of East Anglia and Northumbria, watchers on the cliffs see sails rising like black wings against the grey horizon. The age of peace under Edgar draws toward its end, and the North remembers its old language of steel. The new threat begins during the troubled reign of Ethelred, later called the Unready. Though his title conceals the complexity of his time, he inherits a prosperous kingdom, yet one stretched thin by its own success. The unity built through patience demands constant attention. Without strong hands, its seams begin to loosen. Across the water, Denmark gathers under kings ambitious enough to test England's wealth. Among them stands Sweyn Forkbeard, son of Harold Bluetooth, ruler of a hardened people and commander of a navy unmatched in Europe. For years, trade and tribute link the two realms. Merchants of Lincoln and York still voyage north, exchanging cloth and silver for timber and furs. They speak the same tongue as their hosts and drink from the same cups. But friendship among kings rarely endures the weight of envy. Word reaches the Danelaw that Denmark prepares for war. Old loyalties waver, memories stir. Many in the northern shires still keep cousins across the sea. The line between kin and enemy grows uncertain. The first raids strike with the sharpness of memory. In 980, ships appear off the coast of Kent, then along the Humber. Towns burn as quickly as they are rebuilt. The attacks are measured, probing the kingdom's readiness. Ethelred gathers his council and orders defences strengthened. Burhs are repaired, fleets assembled. Yet coordination across so vast a realm proves difficult. The rivers that once carried trade now deliver alarm. The Danelaw finds itself caught between duty and origin. Its towns are English by law, yet Scandinavian by heritage. Jarls turned ealdormen swear loyalty to Winchester, but maintain quiet correspondence with Denmark. When fleets return in greater numbers, some ports open their gates without resistance, choosing negotiation over ruin. Tribute, known as Danegeld, flows across the sea, silver bought for silence. Each payment buys months of peace, but teaches the invaders how valuable England's wealth has become. Lincoln's markets remain open throughout these uneasy years. Caravans arrive from the south bearing grain and cloth for export, while northern merchants trade in iron and salt. The city's prosperity gives illusion of calm. Beneath its noise, anxiety grows. The people sense that this is not the small piracy of earlier generations, but a new wave driven by kings, not outlaws. The scale of preparation on both sides reveals the change. Fleets of hundreds of ships, armies marching along organized routes, messages carried by coded signals along the coast. The north prepares for storm. Sweyn Forkbeard lands in 994 at Sandwich, joined by the Norwegian prince Olaf Tryggvason. Together they move up the Thames, their ships darkening the river with rows of shields. London resists fiercely, its bridge bristling with defenders, and the attackers withdraw northward, ravaging towns as they go. Among those spared are the 5 boroughs, whose leaders send envoys bearing tribute. The invaders accept silver and supplies, wintering in the very lands once shaped by their forefathers. The Danelaw, seat of hybrid identity, becomes their supply base. Ethelred responds with diplomacy. He summons bishops and nobles to negotiate with Olaf, offering gifts and baptism. The Norwegian accepts, pledging to leave England in peace. The gesture wins a brief respite, but does not deter Denmark. Sweyn returns the following years with greater force, and the rhythm of payment resumes. Danegeld becomes a tax woven into law itself, a grim acknowledgement that buying peace has become policy. Through these decades, the character of the Danelaw shifts once more. The sons of those who served Edgar now command local defences under royal charter. Their loyalty deepens through necessity. They fight not for kinship, but for stability, the trade, the fields, the livelihoods that depend on it. Militia drills take place in the market squares. Forges ring late into the night. The northern towns learn that peace, once won through diplomacy, must now be defended with readiness. In Lincoln, the Alderman Leofwine oversees both fortifications and commerce. He strengthens the walls, repairs the gates, and raises levies from neighbouring villages. His leadership blends Danish discipline with English organisation. Under his command, the city withstands raids that sweep through the countryside. Chronicles speak of beacons lit along the Witham, signals answering from Nottingham and Derby. The Danelaw, once the frontier of invasion, now becomes the kingdom's shield. Still, the pressure mounts. Between 1002 and 1010, fleets of unprecedented size arrive each summer. Villages vanish under torchlight, monasteries fall silent. Ethelred orders a massacre of Danes living in the south, hoping to remove internal threats. The decree shocks the north, where many families share that ancestry. Among the slain is Gunhild, sister of Sweyn Forkbeard's queen. Her death becomes the spark that ignites vengeance. In 1013, the Danish king invades with a force that surpasses all before. His army marches through the Danelaw unopposed. Town after town opens its gates, acknowledging him as rightful ruler. Lincoln submits first, followed by Nottingham and Leicester. To many inhabitants, Sweyn's claim seems natural, the return of northern authority rather than foreign conquest. Yet others resist quietly, protecting their trade and property under whichever king prevails. Allegiance becomes a matter of survival. Ethelred flees to Normandy. England bends beneath Danish control for the second time in its history. Sweyn establishes his capital at Gainsborough, near the junction of the Trent and the Humber. The choice carries symbolism, a seat at the centre of the old Danelaw, surrounded by loyal shires. He issues charters, collects tribute, and plans a stable regime. His rule, however, lasts only a year. In February 1014, he dies suddenly, leaving his son, Canute, to claim the throne amid confusion. The English rally briefly. Ethelred returns from exile, supported by his son, Edmund Ironside, whose vigour restores courage to the realm. Armies clash along the Thames and in the Midlands. The Danelaw again becomes battlefield and prize. Lincoln and Stamford provide supplies to both sides, their merchants hedging loyalty against uncertainty. When Ethelred dies in 1016, the contest narrows to Edmund and Nut. The final struggle unfolds with precision. Battles at Shurston, Brentford, and Ashington drain both forces. Edmund fights with relentless bravery, earning the name Ironside. Yet Nut commands the greater fleet and deeper coffers. The young king's ambition combines strategy with restraint. He offers treaties when victory seems certain, preferring order to ruin. When Edmund falls ill and dies later that year, Nut inherits a united kingdom. The northern shires accept him readily. To them, his rule restores a familiar rhythm, strong kingship guided by practical law. He confirms property rights, lowers certain taxes, and honours both English and Danish traditions. His court includes nobles from every region, and his decrees are issued in the English tongue. Under his reign, the Danelaw achieves a second life, this time within an empire that stretches across the North Sea. Nut rules from Winchester and London, but his heart remains in the northern world. He visits Lincoln often, attending Mass in the great church built on the hill above the city. Chronicles describe his generosity, gifts of gold to monasteries, restoration of lands once seized in war, and protection of trade. Under him, the distinction between Dane and Englishman fades further. The sea that once divided kingdoms now unites them under a single crown. In the markets of Nottingham and Leicester, prosperity returns with startling speed. Trade with Denmark and Norway resumes, this time under royal charter. Merchants carry English wool north and return with iron, amber, and fine timber. The North Sea becomes the highway of empire. Nut's lawgivers standardize weights and measures. His mints strike coins bearing his image in both Latin and runic inscription. The Danelaw, once the experiment of conquest, becomes the model of integration. By the mid-1020s, England stands as the richest realm in northern Europe. Knut's authority extends across Denmark, Norway, and parts of Sweden. His council includes bishops and jarls from every shore of his dominion. The 5 boroughs, positioned at the empire's heart, benefit more than any other region. Their artisans produce weapons for royal armies. Their ships carry goods between kingdoms, and their laws influence governance abroad. The Danelaw, born from invasion, now defines the very fabric of Scandinavian rule. Yet beneath this order lies the inevitability of time. Knut's power rests on unity of will, his alone. He governs through talent and fear, but succession looms like winter beyond harvest. His sons, Harold Harefoot and Harthacnut, quarrel for future dominion. The nobles of the Danelaw, pragmatic as always, watch and wait, aware that the tides of the sea and the crowns of kings never remain still. For now, the northern plains shine with prosperity. The river trade hums, churches gleam with new stone, and peace holds across the land. The people of the Danelaw, heirs of both Alfred and Ragnar, live through another transformation, from conquered subjects to partners in empire. Their fields feed armies that no longer burn them. Their ports send ships to lands that once threatened them. History, always in motion, turns again toward the north. Spring returns to the valleys of Lincolnshire. The rivers swell with snowmelt, carrying the reflection of new towers built during the years of Knut's rule. His empire, bound by sea and law, stretches from the Channel to the fjords of Norway. In the towns of the Danelaw, this dominion feels both familiar and remarkable. A northern world united not by conquest alone, but by shared order. The people who once watched the horizon for raiders now see the same horizon as a road to opportunity. Knut governs through discipline and ritual. Each season, he travels through the shires, holding court in major towns. Lincoln becomes one of his favored seats. Its merchants supply his fleets, and its craftsmen forge weapons and jewelry for the royal household. The city glows with the color of trade: copper from Ireland, silk from the continent, iron from the Pennines. Along its quays lie longships rebuilt as cargo vessels, their hulls polished and broad, carrying peace instead of war. Within his court, men of mixed origin serve side by side. Jarls from Denmark sit beside English earls, bishops beside ship captains. Knut's rule depends on this balance. He rewards loyalty rather than lineage, binding his nobles through wealth and responsibility. The Danelaw's leaders, descendants of those who once defied Alfred, stand among his closest allies. They administer law, collect taxes, and command levies on the king's behalf. Their cooperation transforms the region from former frontier into the administrative heart of empire. Religion completes the transformation. Nut, baptized and devout, understands that faith can unify where blood cannot. He endows monasteries across the realm, funding new cloisters at Ely and Peterborough, and restoring lands to churches damaged in earlier wars. At Lincoln, he attends Easter Mass with gifts of gold and incense. Chroniclers describe him kneeling in prayer beside English bishops, a symbol of piety that silences doubt about his devotion. His generosity strengthens both his rule and his image as a Christian monarch in a Christian land. The people respond with renewed pride. In the 5 boroughs, markets thrive beyond memory. Fairs at Stamford and Leicester attract traders from Normandy, Flanders, and Denmark. Coins bearing the king's profile pass from hand to hand. Their steady value makes them the currency of Northern Europe. Farmers, secure under royal protection, expand cultivation into the fens and uplands. Craftsmen form guilds, their halls decorated with carvings of ships and saints. Stability becomes the measure of success. Language continues its slow evolution. English now absorbs the rhythm and clarity of Norse syntax. Laws are written in simple phrasing, direct and unadorned, accessible to every landowner who can read or listen. The new style suits the age, practical, concise, confident. It carries across seas and courts, spreading with the trade routes of the empire. The speech of the Danelaw shapes the English tongue that will endure long after kings change. Nut's reach extends beyond governance. He acts as mediator among kingdoms, inviting envoys from Scotland, Wales, and the continent to his councils. His marriage to Emma of Normandy, widow of Ethelred, seals political alliances and strengthens legitimacy in the south. Together, they present an image of unity, a royal household that bridges Saxon and Dane, Christian and Norse, island and continent. Their sons, Harold Harefoot and Harthacnut, embody this synthesis, though destiny will test it. Under Sinnot, law becomes an instrument of civilization. His legal codes confirm property rights, protect church lands, and regulate trade. They preserve the assembly tradition of the Danelaw while extending royal oversight. Every verdict echoes a philosophy born in northern fields. Justice as measured compensation, not vengeance. The kingdom learns that stability depends on fairness, and fairness on memory. Record-keeping flourishes. Clerks fill archives with charters and decrees. The act of writing replaces the sword as symbol of power. The empire's wealth grows immense. Ships laden with silver and grain sail from Lincoln to Ribe and Roskilde, connecting England to Scandinavia as never before. Ports on both sides of the sea mirror each other. English towns echo Danish markets, and Danish artisans adopt English methods of minting and craft. The North Sea becomes a mirror where one culture reflects the other. Travelers move freely between them, speaking a language that belongs to both. The 5 boroughs profit most. Lincoln becomes second only to London in size and importance. Leicester's forges supply weapons for royal garrisons across the empire. Nottingham refines leather for armour and harness. Derby sends wool to Flanders. Stamford manufactures coins and ornaments for export. Prosperity radiates outward, drawing settlers from other regions. The Danelaw, once synonymous with division, stands as the model of unity. Nut's vision reaches its height around 1030. The empire's territories, England, Denmark, Norway, operate under a shared system of tribute and trade. At his coronation in Rome, envoys from the papacy acknowledge his realm as a pillar of Christendom. For a brief moment, the kings of Europe recognize the strength of the Northern Sea Empire. In this structure, the Danelaw serves as anchor, its towns forming the administrative center through which resources flow. From these lands, England wields influence across oceans. The king himself ages with dignity. Chroniclers describe a man of great stature and calm bearing, his hair cropped short, his expression solemn. He walks among his soldiers unguarded, confident in loyalty. His court celebrates him as both conqueror and reformer. To his subjects in the Danelaw, he appears as the fulfillment of history, descendant of the raiders who once brought fire, now the monarch who brings peace. Under his reign, memory finds reconciliation. Even as he rules with assurance, time gathers against him. Years of travel and governance wear upon his strength. He spends long months at sea, maintaining control over distant provinces. In 1035, during a campaign in Denmark, illness overtakes him. The news reaches Lincoln by autumn. The great king is dead. Bells toll across the shires, their echoes rolling through the valleys like thunder. The empire he built begins to tremble, its balance dependent on his singular will. Succession divides the realm. In England, Harold Harefoot claims the throne with the support of nobles from the old Danelaw. In Denmark, Harthacnut gathers his own followers. Between them lies a kingdom uncertain of allegiance. Once again, the northern shires stand at the center of decision. Their lords favor order above loyalty. They recognize Harold first, ensuring local stability while awaiting the outcome abroad. Under Harold's short rule, trade continues, but confidence weakens. The rhythm of prosperity falters. Some towns close their mints, others hoard silver. Ships sail less frequently, wary of piracy and politics. Yet daily life endures. Farmers plant, craftsmen labor, priests chant their prayers. The habit of stability outlasts the king who inspired it. When Harold dies in 1040 and Harthacnut crosses from Denmark to claim the throne, the transition unfolds without bloodshed. The Danelaw, seasoned by centuries of upheaval, responds to change with composure. Harthacnut, though vigorous, governs with heavy taxation to fund his continental ambitions. The burden strains loyalty, especially in the north. Rebellions flare in Worcester and beyond, swiftly suppressed but revealing fatigue. His death in 1042 ends the Danish dynasty in England. The crown passes to Edward the Confessor, son of Ethelred and Emma, a monarch of English birth but continental upbringing. With his accession, the North Sea Empire dissolves, yet the influence of its rule remains carved into the kingdom's foundations. Under Edward, the Danelaw retains its prosperity. The laws of Nut continue to guide justice. His coinage remains in circulation. His roads and fortresses still define geography. The mingled culture of the 5 boroughs persists unchanged. People measure their worth not by ancestry, but by land, craft, and trade. England has learned to think of itself as a single realm, and the Danelaw, once the frontier, has become its heart of endurance. In the twilight of Edward's reign, old alliances fade into legend. The sailors of the Humber still sing songs of Nut, steering his ship against the tide, a parable of power's limit. Merchants remember the years when their goods moved freely from Lincoln to Trondheim. Priests preserve his name in prayers as a model of humility. The Danelaw, forged through so many transformations, holds these memories like sediment in a river, each layer a record of survival. At dusk, the bells of Lincoln ring over the water, their sound spreading across the marshes and into the fading light. Markets close, and fishermen pull in their nets. Children listen to elders recount tales of kings who once crossed the sea and ruled with wisdom. The horizon darkens, yet the river glows faintly beneath the moon. Within that quiet reflection lies the legacy of a world built on adaptation, a kingdom that rose from conquest to unity, from chaos to order, and from the roar of battle to the calm of law. The empire that Nut forged holds for a single generation. Its strength rests upon his will, and when that will passes, the sea itself seems to lose direction. The North Sea world, once bound by trade and faith, begins to drift. Ships still cross from Denmark and Norway, but their purpose changes. The age of unity gives way to one of uncertainty. England remains rich, yet its crown grows lighter in the hands of those who inherit it. After Harthacnut's death in 1042, Edward the Confessor takes the throne, a king of English birth, but Norman upbringing, quiet and introspective. His rule favors prayer over politics. Monks thrive under his patronage, but barons and earls sense opportunity in his restraint. Among them rises a family whose power will shape the island's fate. The House of Godwin, rooted in the soil of Wessex, yet tied by marriage to the north. In the Danelaw, prosperity continues under routine. The laws of Cannut remain in force. The markets hum, and the great boroughs hold their customary assemblies. Lincoln's mint stamps silver pennies bearing Edward's calm face. Leicester and Nottingham trade in wool and leather. Derby's forges ring through the morning mist. The people value stability more than names upon the throne. Their fields, roads, and laws endure beyond the reach of royal temper. Yet distance between crown and countryside widens. Edward's court gathers men from Normandy, clerics, advisors, and knights whose manners and speech differ from the English way. The northern earls, proud of their heritage, watch these arrivals with suspicion. Earl Siward of Northumbria, descendant of Danish settlers, maintains strong control over the old Danelaw. He governs with a warrior's precision, balancing loyalty to the king with defense of local customs. Under his oversight, the region remains orderly, its people loyal to law rather than intrigue. The pattern of calm continues for decades, but change stirs beyond the sea. Norway's kings, restless for glory, rebuild fleets reminiscent of earlier ages. Harald Hardrada, veteran of distant wars, looks westward with ambition. His name echoes through taverns and marketplaces, carried by sailors who remember the old unity under Knut. To them, he represents the memory of empire, the vision of northern dominion reborn. England hears these whispers and strengthens its coasts, but few believe another storm will come. Within the Danelaw, wealth deepens. The wool trade expands toward Flanders. Lincoln's artisans export fine cloth, woven with intricate patterns of red and blue. Guilds regulate craft and commerce, setting standards known from York to Winchester. The stability of these years gives the region an air of permanence, as if the centuries of war have finally yielded a lasting peace. Beneath that surface, however, alliances begin to shift. The death of Earl Siward in 1055 alters the balance of power. His title passes to Tostig Godwinson, brother of Harold, the king's favoured general. Tostig governs Northumbria, including much of the old Danelaw, with severity ill-suited to its people. Taxes rise, justice bends toward favour. The northern towns, accustomed to local autonomy, resist interference. Murmurs of rebellion spread through the markets of York and the courts of Lincoln. The region that once embodied cooperation now begins to feel the weight of southern ambition. In 1065, discontent ignites into open revolt. The Thegns of Northumbria gather at York, calling upon their neighbours in the 5 boroughs to join them. They demand the removal of Tostig and the restoration of fair governance. Nottingham and Lincoln send delegations, cautious but sympathetic. The uprising spreads along the rivers that once carried trade. When King Edward sends Harold north to quell it, he chooses diplomacy over battle. The rebels surrender on condition that Tostig be exiled. Harold agrees, winning their loyalty but planting the seeds of tragedy. The following year, Edward dies without an heir. The Witan, the Council of Nobles, elects Harold Godwinson king. His coronation in Westminster fills England with hope. He is a warrior of proven skill and a leader who understands both north and south. Yet destiny gathers against him from every direction. Across the Channel, William of Normandy claims that Edward promised him the crown. Across the sea, Harold Hardrada assembles a fleet of invasion. England stands at the crossroads of two ambitions, and the Danelaw will again find itself in the path of armies. In late summer of 1066, sails appear off the coast of Northumbria. Hardrada's ships number in the hundreds, sleek and black against the horizon. With him sails Tostig, seeking restoration through vengeance. Their forces sweep inland, capturing York after fierce battle. The news travels south with alarming speed. Harold Godwinson marches north with unprecedented urgency, covering 200 miles in a single week. His army reaches Stamford Bridge on the morning of September 25th. The clash that follows carries the weight of centuries. Hardrada's veterans, fierce and disciplined, face an army fighting for its homeland. The battle rages through the day beneath a pale autumn sun. Arrows darken the sky. The bridge itself becomes a legend as a lone Norseman holds it against an army until he is cut down. By evening, the invaders lie broken. Hardrada falls with his banner wrapped around him. Tostig dies beside him. The victory is complete but costly. The Danelaw, bloodied yet loyal, witnesses the final echo of the Viking age fade into silence. Harold's triumph at Stamford Bridge restores national pride, but it leaves his army exhausted. 3 days later, new messengers arrive from the south. The Normans have landed at Hastings. The king turns his weary troops toward another march, this time to meet a fresh enemy. The Danelaw provides supplies and men, its fields yielding grain for the march, and its forges crafting spearheads overnight. Yet distance and fatigue conspire against success. In October, Harold falls in battle, and with him ends the line of English kings descended from Alfred. The news spreads through the Danelaw with somber acceptance. People remember the old days when foreign banners rose above their walls, and they prepare once again to adapt. William of Normandy, now called the Conqueror, moves methodically northward, securing submission through oath and charter. Lincoln surrenders without siege. Leicester follows. Only York resists, and when it falls, William's wrath burns across the countryside. The harrying of the north leaves scars that will mark the land for generations. Villages vanish, fields blacken, and survivors scatter into the woods. The Danelaw, once heart of prosperity, becomes a wasteland. Yet even ruin cannot erase memory. Within a decade, the boroughs rebuild under Norman administration. Castles rise of stone where wooden halls once stood. The newcomers record every acre, every household, every animal. In 1086, the Domesday Book captures the entire realm in ink, a monument to control. Within its pages, the Danelaw appears not as lost province, but as vital region. Its wealth measured, its customs noted, its endurance proven. The survey reveals continuity beneath conquest. Many names remain Scandinavian. Fields still bear the boundaries of ancient lore. The conqueror measures what he never truly remakes. For the people, adaptation continues as instinct. The farmers plough under the shadows of new fortresses. Merchants trade under the gaze of foreign lords. The laws of the past survive in practice even when ignored in theory. Assemblies become courts under Norman reeves, yet the habit of collective judgment persists. The spirit of the thing lives on in the jury system that begins to take shape. The Danelaw's influence, once confined to its borders, spreads quietly through the machinery of empire. By the century's end, the landscape bears the marks of transformation. Churches of Romanesque design rise beside older stone crosses carved with northern motifs. Norman lords build manor houses on estates once owned by Danish jarls, yet they employ the same tenants and pay tribute from the same fields. The old and the new coexist in practical harmony. The people of the Danelaw, shaped by generations of change, adapt without surrendering identity. As winter descends, the plains of Lincolnshire gleam beneath frost. The rivers lie still, and the air carries the smell of smoke from hearths. Inside every hall, stories are told, of Guthrum and Alfred, of Ethelfled and Canute, of Harold and William. These tales no longer divide. They form a single lineage of endurance, the chronicle of a land that survived every conquest by transforming each conqueror in return. The Danelaw has ceased to exist in name, yet it lives in everything England has become, in the law that values fairness over command, in the language that binds the island's voices together, in the stubborn independence of its people. Its history closes not with defeat, but with absorption, its spirit folded into the fabric of a kingdom still young enough to learn from its scars. Beyond the walls of Lincoln, the wind sweeps across empty fields. It carries whispers from 1,000 years of change, the sound of oars, the clang of hammers, the murmur of prayer. The echoes mingle until they become indistinguishable, a single note resonating through the soil. In that sound rests the truth of the Danelaw. Every conquest ends, but influence endures. Snow melts along the Trent, revealing the furrows of ploughed fields beneath the grey sky. A generation has passed since the banners of Normandy replaced those of Wessex. Across England, the rhythm of daily life continues, steady but altered. Stone towers rise where timber once stood, and foreign accents echo through court and cloister. The Norman conquest has changed the surface of the realm, yet the soil of the Danelaw still holds its own memory. Beneath the new order, the patterns of the old remain. William's administrators govern with precision. Castles crown every borough. Garrisons monitor trade routes and river crossings. In Lincoln, a vast fortress dominates the western hill, overlooking the city and its cathedral. The markets below continue their old rhythm. Fish from the coast, wool from the fields, salt from the fens. But every transaction now bears the mark of royal oversight. Tolls fill Norman treasuries. Scribes record each exchange in Latin. Yet merchants still count their coins in the same manner their fathers did. And the town's prosperity endures through habit stronger than decree. The Domesday Book, completed in 1086, reveals the depth of this endurance. Its pages list every holding, from the grand estates of Norman lords to the smallest crofts along the rivers. In the shires, once known as the Danelaw, half the place names end in by, Thorpe, or Thwaite. Echoes of Scandinavian tongues unforgotten. The survey's numbers speak quietly of survival. Fertile lands, thriving mills, crowded markets. The conqueror measures wealth that was born long before his coming. The Danelaw persists as structure within transformation. Norman lords adopt the efficiency of the north. They retain local reeves to collect taxes, use existing courts to judge disputes, and employ scribes fluent in the mixed language of the region. Feudal hierarchy overlays communal law without erasing it. The practice of juries, 12 men sworn to speak truth, evolves from the old thing, the assembly that once governed the Danelaw. Justice, shaped by centuries of adaptation, becomes England's inheritance. In the countryside, the landscape changes in texture, but not in essence. Great estates spread across the fertile plains, each centered on a manor built of stone. Around them cluster villages of timber and thatch, their layout following patterns set generations earlier. Fields remain divided by hedgerows and ancient ditches. The rhythm of sowing and harvest follows the same calendar, marked by saints and seasons. Norman knights may own the land, but the people who work it still carry the language, customs, and instincts of the North. Faith provides continuity through transformation. The new cathedrals, massive, symmetrical, built of limestone quarried from local hills, rise over the ruins of earlier churches. Their rounded arches and towering naves proclaim the grandeur of the new dynasty. Yet the carvings along their walls reveal another story. Dragons curl around crosses. Interlaced beasts frame Latin inscriptions. The sculptors are Englishmen trained in northern motifs, blending old artistry with new ambition. The result is neither Saxon nor Norman. It is English, born from the meeting of both. At Lincoln, the cathedral begun under Bishop Remigius rises beside the castle. Its bells carry across the valley, calling farmers from the fields and merchants from their stalls. On feast days, the procession of clergy passes through streets lined with banners, showing both the royal lion and the ancient knots of Norse design. The city's people follow with reverence, but also pride. To them, the cathedral stands as proof that every conquest yields creation. Education follows the same pattern. Monastic schools teach Latin grammar and scripture, but preserve the vernacular for poetry and record. Scribes continue to write charters in a simplified English, the descendant of Danelaw speech. The combination gives England its dual literary tradition, scholarly and practical, formal and direct. The clear syntax that once guided trade now shapes law and literature alike. Across the north, trade revives after the devastation of the harrying. Lincoln once again becomes a center of exchange. Merchants from Flanders and the Rhine travel inland along the Witham, filling warehouses with cloth and wine. Leicester's forges resound with the work of armourers, supplying Norman knights. Derby prospers from its tanneries. Nottingham's market expands under royal charter. The scars of conquest fade beneath the sound of commerce. The Danelaw's genius for adaptation reasserts itself. Language continues to evolve in the workshops and taverns of these towns. Old Norse terms mingle with Norman French, producing expressions rich in rhythm and simplicity. Words like law, sky, skin, and skill join the lexicon beside castle, court, and justice. The English tongue, tempered by conquest and cooperation alike, grows into a flexible instrument, capable of poetry, statute, and prayer. The language of Lincoln's merchants will, in time, become the voice of an empire. The new aristocracy, though foreign in origin, learns swiftly from the land it rules. Norman lords marry English widows, inherit northern customs, and adopt local saints. Many take pleasure in the legends of the region, hearing tales of Alfred and Canute as if they were ancestors of their own. The boundaries between conqueror and conquered blur within a single generation. The Danelaw, always a meeting place of cultures, turns even conquest into conversation. By the turn of the 12th century, England's governance has settled into order. The sheriffs of Lincolnshire, Leicestershire, and Nottinghamshire report directly to the Crown, collecting revenues from thriving markets. Royal roads connect the boroughs to London and York. Couriers ride them in half the time once required. Castles serve as both defense and administration. From their keeps, justice radiates outward through the countryside, binding regions into a single system. The kingdom, shaped by so many invasions, now functions with efficiency unmatched in Europe. Within this framework, memory softens into legend. The old heroes of the Danelaw, Halfdan, Guthrum, Ethelflaed, and Knut, survive in song rather than record. Skaldic verses fade into English ballads, their details transformed by imagination. Children learn the tales beside the hearth, unaware that they echo real histories. Through these stories, the spirit of the North endures, reshaped into myth yet alive in meaning. The natural world mirrors this continuity. Along the Humber and the Trent, waterfowl return each spring to the same marshes where longships once anchored. The rivers carry traders instead of warriors, their banks lined with mills and cottages. Farther inland, stone bridges replace fords, and monasteries reclaim fields long neglected. Every change deepens rather than erases the character of the land. The Danelaw becomes a memory embedded in geography. Its law courts turned parish halls, its watchtowers turned church steeples. By the reign of Henry I, grandson of William the Conqueror, the transformation stands complete. England has become a single organism, feudal in structure, monastic in learning, mercantile in spirit. The northern shires contribute more than taxes. They define the temperament of the nation. Their practicality, born of centuries of resilience, infuses royal policy. Henry's reforms in justice echo the assemblies of the Danelaw. Decisions reached through consultation, verdicts grounded in reason. The kingdom rules by law because the Danelaw taught it to, yet every foundation carries the trace of struggle. Beneath Lincoln's streets, archaeologists of a later age will find layers of ash, charred timbers, and broken pottery. Each stratum tells a story. Viking settlement, Mercian reconquest, Danish revival, Norman conquest. The city's history becomes a palimpsest written by time. To live in such a place is to feel the weight of continuity pressing upward through the stones. On winter evenings, light spills from the windows of taverns along the river. Sailors drink beside merchants, their laughter mingling with the creak of moored ships. Stories of distant lands fill the air, of Norway's cliffs, of Flanders markets, of Rome's churches. England, once an island divided, now listens outward. The Danelaws, maritime spirit, lives on in every voyage launched from its shores. When night falls, the cathedral bells mark the hours. The sound travels across frozen fields, through villages and farmsteads, until it fades into the sea's steady breath. That sound unites centuries, the chime of peace built on the echoes of invasion. Within it lingers the heart of the Danelaw, endurance, adaptation, and faith in order born from change. The wind over the Midlands carries the scent of earth and river. Fields stretch toward the horizon where the light fades behind low hills. Between them rise towns whose names have echoed through 1,000 years. Lincoln, Leicester, Derby, Nottingham, and Stamford. Their streets no longer bear the mark of conquest, yet every stone and syllable remembers it. The 5 boroughs endure not as relics of invasion, but as the living heart of England's identity. In the rhythm of their markets, in the geometry of their streets, and in the voices of their people, the old Danelaw still breathes. The centuries that followed the Norman conquest smoothed the surface of history, yet beneath that surface the pattern remains. The councils that govern these towns descend from the assemblies once held beneath open sky. The laws they enforce trace their lineage to the codes spoken in Norse and written in Old English. every judgment rendered in fairness, every contract sealed by oath carries the shadow of the thing, that ancient faith in community over command. Language holds the most enduring memory. From the words once spoken in Viking camps and Saxon villages grew the common tongue of a nation. The language that fills English law and literature, simple in structure yet vast in reach, owes much to the northern speech forged in the five boroughs. Its directness reflects the pragmatism of traders and farmers who valued clarity over flourish. Its rhythm carries the cadence of two peoples learning to understand one another. Even now, in the fields around Lincoln and the lanes of Leicester, the dialect keeps traces of that first mingling. The clipped vowels, the sturdy consonants, the phrases that bridge a millennium. The landscape, too, remembers. Across Lincolnshire and Derbyshire, the suffix by marks the settlements founded by northern hands. Grimsby, Appleby, Whitby, names that mean simply farmstead or village. They are words of belonging, not conquest. Each marks a place where strangers became neighbours, where the boundaries between Saxon and Dane dissolved into shared soil. The countryside of the East Midlands is not a museum of the past, but a continuation of it, shaped by every generation that tilled, traded, and built upon the same foundations. Archaeologists will one day uncover the layers of this continuity: buried walls, shards of pottery, fragments of runes. But the truest evidence lies in living custom. The English preference for compromise over absolutes, for law over vengeance, for cooperation over pride, arises from the same soil that sustained the Danelaw. It is the temperament of a people shaped by mixture. Conquest may have begun the story, but coexistence wrote its ending. The five boroughs teach that history does not move in straight lines. Each was founded in war, flourished in trade, fell in conflict, and rose again through adaptation. Their cycles of loss and renewal mirror the island's own rhythm. In Lincoln, the Romans' grid still guides medieval lanes. In Nottingham, the caves beneath the city echo with centuries of habitation. In Leicester, the stones of Saxon churches and Norman castles lie side by side. The physical layering of these towns forms a map of time itself, a reminder that civilization grows not through replacement, but through accumulation. The spirit of the North spread far beyond its old borders. The assemblies of the Danelaw evolved into the courts and juries of English law. The custom of open deliberation shaped the concept of parliamentary governance. The king's peace, once enforced through local oaths, became a national ideal. Even the measurement of land and tax owes debt to northern precision. These habits of fairness and record created the administrative backbone of the realm. From them emerged the institutions that would, centuries later, govern an empire spanning half the world. Religion transformed in similar fashion. The missionaries who once brought the cross to pagan settlements did more than convert. They absorbed. The church learned to speak with the accent of the North, to weave Christian faith through the warp of old legend. The dragons carved upon cathedral doors, the interlaced beasts framing illuminated manuscripts, are the surviving gestures of that dialogue. The English faith became not a rejection of the old world, but its continuation in new form, a belief that sanctity resides in transformation. By the High Middle Ages, the five boroughs stood as vital centres of commerce. Their fairs linked English goods to the markets of Flanders, the Baltic, and the Mediterranean. The sea routes first mapped by Viking merchants became arteries of global trade. The spirit of enterprise that once drove longships across oceans now drove caravans and ships carrying wool, tin, and salt to distant ports. The same instinct that once sought land and freedom through exploration found its echo in the later age of discovery. In this sense, the Danelaw's legacy stretches beyond England itself, carried by the language and lore that travelled with every ship flying the English flag. Cultural memory preserved the romance of the North long after its history became ordinary. Chronicles and sagas intertwined until legend and record were indistinguishable. Writers of later centuries, monks, scholars, poets, looked back on the age of Alfred and Guthrum, of Ethelflaed and Canute, as the dawn of English character. In their telling, the struggles of the Danelaw became parable, chaos tempered by order, difference resolved through courage. The notion of England as a land of balance, where opposing forces create harmony, traces directly to that encounter between Saxon and Dane. Through all its metamorphoses, the Danelaw's truest legacy lies in endurance. Its people learned to live under many crowns and to outlast them all. When kings fell, they adjusted. When borders shifted, they remained. Their towns survived by adapting, their culture by blending. In that resilience lies the seed of modern England, the capacity to absorb change without losing identity. The national character that would later face storms, wars, and empires was first tempered here in the meeting of two worlds along the Trent and the Humber. The Domesday Survey, meant to measure possession, inadvertently preserved memory. It recorded the remnants of the Danelaw at the very moment they began to fade. The place names, the customs, the traces of old lore. Every entry, written by Norman scribes, confirms that the legacy of the North had already merged with the English whole. The conquerors could catalogue the land, but they could not catalogue the spirit that animated it. That spirit became invisible yet omnipresent, shaping every institution that followed. Centuries later, when the English Parliament first met, its procedures echoed the assemblies of the 5 boroughs. Debate, consensus, and the authority of collective voice. When common law matured, its emphasis on precedent and fairness reflected the practical judgments once delivered beneath the open sky of Lincolnshire. When the language of Chaucer and Shakespeare blossomed, it carried within its syntax the hard simplicity of Norse speech joined to the melody of Saxon verse. The Danelaw's influence became so thoroughly woven into England that few recognized its source. It had ceased to be heritage. It had become nature. Even today, the geography of the old Danelaw carries a certain tone, measured, self-reliant, quietly proud. Its people trace descent not from kings, but from continuity. Their towns remain industrious rather than grand, their beauty born of use rather than ornament. The same pragmatic grace that once defined the borderland between two civilizations continues in every workshop, market, and field. History may have renamed the land, but it never changed its character. At sunset, the Cathedral of Lincoln catches the last light, its towers glowing above the city like the memory of fire. Below, the streets hum with the same energy that has animated them for a millennium. Traders close their stalls, students cross the bridges, and bells mark the evening hour. In the distance, the rivers flow toward the Humber and the North Sea, the old highway of arrival and departure. The sound of water carries faint echoes of oars and sails, of languages that once met and merged. The sea that brought invaders became the mirror of a shared destiny. The story of the 5 boroughs does not end with their fading from chronicles. It continues in every aspect of the nation that grew from them, in its laws, its tongue, its endurance. They were never merely towns. They were experiments in coexistence, laboratories of identity, where the idea of England first took shape. From them came the notion that strength lies not in purity, but in mixture, not in isolation, but in connection. As night gathers over the plains, the wind moves through fields of barley, rustling like distant surf. The sound could belong to any century. It carries across villages whose names still speak the language of the north. In that sound, history feels close, as if the earth itself remembers the generations that built, fought, and tilled upon it. The 5 boroughs remain their monument, not carved in marble, but written in landscape, law, and language. Their legacy is the endurance of England itself, a realm shaped by storms, yet always remade by its own resilience.